Hey, I just wanna see you on my little grave.
Welcome to Armed with Ambition, where we explore leadership transitions and personal growth. I'm your host, Siobhan Cunningham, and I am so excited to take you on this journey. As a military veteran and leadership trainer, I've faced my share of challenges, and this show is all about you, helping you navigate yours. Today, I'd like to share my story, how I went from struggling with self-doubt in the military to discovering strong leadership. This framework transformed my life, and I am confident it can help you with authenticity. Let's talk a little bit about my personal story. When I arrived at commissioned officers training, my heart was pounding so loudly that I thought everyone could hear it. I looked around and thought, what am I doing here? I do not belong here. I wasn't afraid of making a mistake. I was more terrified of being exposed. Exposed as a fraud, someone who couldn't handle the weight of leadership. That fear haunted me like a shadow. It never left my side. No matter how hard I worked or how much I accomplished, it was never enough to silence the doubt in my mind. Girl, I struggled. I didn't feel completely incompetent. I mean, I had excelled in jobs before the military. I've had several jobs as a therapist. I had basically ran an inpatient hospital at night when there was, emergencies happening and very little staff to help support me. So I knew I could do the job. I knew I could do different jobs in different fields, and I know I could excel at them. But in the military, it just felt different. It was like I hadn't earned my place at the table. I honestly felt like I had to justify I was there every single day. No matter how much I prepared or how well I executed this task or that task, I constantly felt the need to prove that my words were worth hearing and that my presence mattered. I can't even say that I directly had things that told me I didn't matter, other than being a very independent person, joining the military at 29, 30, and then automatically being told like I have to go through someone to make decisions about things I've been making decisions about for 10 plus years before I joined the military. The way I thought I could combat this incompetence or having people think I didn't know what I was talking about was by throwing myself into my work. I was determined to prove that I was capable. I'd pushed harder than anyone else. I was skipping meals, losing sleep, working 80 plus hours a week. And honestly, I would say yes to like every extra duty that was thrown my way. I also think that the more I volunteered for things, the more they were like, okay, here you go, here you go, here you go, do it. It was a lot. But the harder I tried, the more I felt like I was still falling short. I was handing people the proof they needed to confirm she doesn't belong here. I felt relentless pressure to prove myself to my peers and superiors, and especially myself. I wanted to do more, do more, do more. The weight was just crushing. I just felt very small. It all came crashing down, of course. You can't keep working and working and working and not think that it's going to catch up, whether because you remove yourself or in my case, I was removed from duty. I remember sitting at the table, typing furiously on the computer. The commander comes in. So, of course, I stand up at attention because he's higher ranking than me, and that's what you do when they walk in. I don't know. It didn't feel good because why are you in my office in the first place? And I just knew something was about to go down. It was more like, wah, 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 wah. But I did hear that because of this, we're going to remove you from duty. I was devastated. Not just because it felt unfair, because like I had tried to tell like other people in my chain of command that I was doing too much. I needed a break. And I believe one of the responses I got was like, well, other people did it and they're fine. So I didn't really felt heard, and I kind of felt discouraged from going above that person to tell how I was feeling. It just felt unfair because it also confirmed my fear that I thought everybody already knew. I'm not good enough. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't belong here. My superiors told me to show up to work, maintain a positive attitude, and contribute however I could. So even though I couldn't do my job, the one that I was hired to do, I did take that advice because it was good advice. How you show up to work is important, especially in the military, but it didn't leave room for me to feel vulnerable or comfortable expressing the betrayal that I felt. I wasn't okay. I had this kind of like stoic facade or a fake smile plastered on my face. But inside, I just had like my heart was broken, my back was stabbed, and I felt like I was bleeding out and no one cared. If I was metaphorically bleeding out on the table, I was fully expecting people to walk by and say, "We're making a mess, clean it up." Like, I just didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel okay. I didn't feel safe in that aspect of being vulnerable, of how I felt. And as a social work officer, I was supposed to embody resilience and be this pillar of mental stability and be the role model that others could look to for support. But there I was, falling apart. And I wasn't just failing at officership, I was failing at my mental health. I was failing at my career. And all these were things that I excelled at before. Again, at one point I was juggling like 3 different jobs, and I also had a good stable question mark relationship, but I felt me. I was able to travel and see the world. I had a good set of friends. I felt like there were pieces of me that were being taken care of. And when I was in the military, I felt like those pieces of me did not exist. That contradiction hit me hard, though, of trying to have mental stability and be this picture of officership. It became clear that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. And at some point, I realized that leadership isn't about keeping everything together at all cost. It's about creating emotional safety, a safety net, if you will, for yourself first, so that you can lead others, or showing your safety net, knowing that you're protected, and then showing those tools for those you lead. Without that foundation of emotional security, then you're building leadership on quicksand. And that's when I began to shift my focus. Instead of striving for perfection, I started looking inward and embracing vulnerability. Only then could I permit myself to heal. At my lowest, I realized that something had to change. I couldn't keep chasing other people's standards. The goalposts always moved when I was doing that. I was hiding behind a mask of strength that just allowed me to keep getting knocked down, knowing that if I got hit, I would bounce back. At that point, I was the queen of bounce back. In the military, it's almost like, it seems like, I'm going to say in my situation, in the military, it seemed like once you're on the radar for being a scumbag or a mess up or just not a good officer or airman, then they keep kind of looking back to you as the scapegoat for all the problems. So this ability to get hit and bounce back, it was getting exhausting, but I also felt like, okay, I can handle it, until I couldn't. And I was like, if I get hit one more time, it is going to be something that I might not recover from. So I needed to rebuild myself, and understanding what that meant was tough. I think ultimately for me, it meant redefining what leadership truly meant. It wasn't about being invincible or perfect. It was about embracing the messiness that's involved with growth, and then allowing yourself the time to heal. And that journey, that lesson of embracing the mess as a growth opportunity and then giving yourself time and space to heal, it led me to the S.T.R.O.N.G Leadership Model. Because again, in the military with my uniform on, I kind of looked Exterior strong, facially no. Very timid, broken, and scared, stoic even. But if you knew my eyes, you knew there was sadness and pain behind those eyes. And I did not feel strong despite my exterior. And the strong leadership model is a framework that I came up with, and it became the guidepost as I navigate through chaos. I learned to surrender, to let go of the need to control every outcome, and accept that it's okay to ask for help. I practice transparency, not only being honest about my struggles, but creating space for others to do the same and knowing when to be transparent and when not to be. I was so angry and bitter towards people at one point in the military during all this happening to me. I behaved in ways that I was not proud of at times, and especially bitter towards those people who threw me under the bus. Valid that those feelings did not help alleviate the pressure of being bitter, did not help alleviate anything, and oftentimes it made things worse, especially if you're a Black woman. There's this phrase, angry Black woman. I was kind of the picture of that at the time. I instead decided to embrace this notion of respectful relationships to remind me that leadership is rooted in connection and not isolation. And choosing optimism gave me hope. It's an act of faith where there's a path forward, even in those darkest moments. And sometimes optimism does come in other people, and it can come through higher power. But ultimately, your optimism is leading you to navigating your next level self. And that's what I had to do. At one point, I realized that I was going to get out of the military, that the Air Force was not for me. This lifestyle was not for me. Could it have been in a different time and place? Sure. I think so. Knowing what I know now, I probably could have stayed in and done great. But at that time, I had to give myself the grace to understand that it wasn't working. In my head, I had failed at that task. Think to myself, okay, if I did not do well at that, then what would I excel at? What would be my next level self? So that grace is almost the most transformative piece to me, because it taught me to show kindness to myself, to forgive my imperfections, and to keep moving forward. Together, strong, these principles help me master the rocky terrain of transitions. I began to captain my ship instead of simply being the skipper. Not to say there's anything wrong with the skipper. We all need a good skipper. But for my ship, I needed to be the captain of it. And now I want to share them with you so that you too can find your strength and lead with authenticity no matter the challenges you face. If you've ever felt like you don't measure up, like you're one mistake away from failure, I want you to know leadership is not about perfection. It's about finding strength in vulnerability and learning from missteps and leading gracefully. That is what this show is about. Together, we'll explore how to apply the strong leadership model and navigate challenges and step fully into your power. During the show, I want to highlight various women of power, military leaders who have transformed the way we lead in life, the way we lead others. And today, we're going to talk about the 6888. Have you ever heard the story of Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams? In December 1994, she took on the challenge unlike any other, leading the only Black and Hispanic Women's Auxiliary Corps company ever to serve overseas during World War II. Stationed in Birmingham, England, Adams was tasked with a mission that was as critical as it was daunting, boosting morale and leading a postal directory service unit as it processed mail for millions of soldiers. Adams met this challenge not just with strategy, but with heart. She understood her community deeply, created spaces like beauty parlors for women to unwind, feel at home, and reconnect with their sense of self amidst the chaos of war. She knew that leadership wasn't just about completing a mission. It was about creating an environment where her team could thrive. By March 1945, Adams was appointed the commanding officer of the 688 Central Postal Directory Battalion, the first battalion of mostly African American women. In France, her team was responsible for clearing a massive backlog of mail and ensuring its delivery to over 7 million soldiers. 7 million. Whew. Their work was critical to the troops' morale. They managed to achieve this task or get it all sorted despite racism, inadequate resources, and grueling work conditions. By the end of World War II, Lieutenant Colonel Adams had made history as the highest ranking Black woman in the military. When asked about her groundbreaking achievements, she responded with humility. I just wanted to do my job. Can you relate? Sometimes leadership isn't about seeking recognition. It's about doing the work, building trust, and creating the conditions for others to succeed. Charity Adams' story reminds us that leadership with heart and resilience can have an enduring legacy. The 688 had to surrender their frustration with the system and the overwhelming nature of their mission. Instead of letting the obstacles paralyze them, they focused on breaking the challenge into manageable steps and trusting their collective ability to overcome chaos. Their leaders were transparent about the importance of the mission, boosting morale of the soldiers who hadn't heard from their loved ones in months. The clarity helped the women see the bigger picture and stay motivated, even in freezing and dimly lit warehouses. Despite facing racism from their own military and local communities, the women built strong, respectful relationships within their unit. They supported each other and fostered a sense of camaraderie that strengthened their resolve. In the face of adversity, the 688 maintained hope that their work mattered. They believed they could clear the backlog and make a difference for the soldiers relying on those letters. That optimism was the driving force behind their success. They believed they could do it. Their leaders embraced the challenge as an opportunity to demonstrate the capabilities of minority women in critical roles. They weren't just sorting mail. They were navigating their way towards a greater sense of purpose and breaking barriers for future generations. And through it all, the 688 extended grace to themselves, to each other, and even to those who doubted them. They focused on their mission rather than letting anger and bitterness slow them down. The story of the 688 teaches us that leadership is about more than achieving results. It's about building resilience, fostering respect, and staying committed to a greater purpose, even in the face of overwhelming odds. First, I want to say thank you to the 688 for paving the way for people like me, those who've come before me as a U.S. Air Force veteran, as a military child, service member, parents. My father served, my grandfather served. It's a huge family of military service members. And so thank you to the 688 for creating a way and helping build a legacy that me and maybe my children and children's children can contribute to moving forward. I want to take a moment to together reflect on a time when you felt overwhelmed by the need to control everything. What would it have looked like to surrender in that moment? The biggest lesson to letting go of control for me has to do with letting go of what other people think. From my parents to my exes to friends, I reached a point where I decided that it didn't matter what anyone thought of me, whether it was good or bad. I realized that it could all change in a blink of an eye. One minute someone hates you, the next minute they love you, and then they hate you. I had to stand on my own despite an opinion either way. So as you're thinking back to that time of maybe you've let someone down or someone said something to you and it impacted how you feel about yourself, I also want you to think about how might letting go of that situation, how might it have opened new possibilities for you? Do me a favor, share your reflections using the hashtag #StrongLeadership. I love to hear how you're embracing this idea of letting go on your journey. Every story needs a hero. Who better to tell those stories than those who've lived them? Military veterans have served on the front lines of history, and now it's time for their voices to shape how that history is told. In today's world, authentic, diverse perspectives in journalism are more critical than ever. Veterans bring courage, integrity, and firsthand experience that can elevate the stories we see and hear. If you're a military veteran with a passion for truth and storytelling, consider a career in journalism. Your perspective matters. Join a community of veterans making waves in media, shaping narratives, and inspiring change. Because the best stories come from those who've been there. Military veterans in journalism. Your voice, your story, our world. Thank you, military veterans in journalism, for supporting this show. Now let's move on to tips about how we can practically apply some of these ideas about strength and surrender and letting go and optimism. Here are 3 ways to start applying the strong principles right now. Let's start with surrender. One of the things that is very difficult for new leaders to do, or leaders who have been burnt in the past, is to delegate. So pick one task you've been holding on to. Whether it's been, a project that you want to get done, but it keeps getting sent to the back burner, lower on the priority list, or something that is really necessary to be done, but you just don't want to do it. Pick a task and then find someone to give it to. Transparency. How can we be more transparent? Maybe you can share a challenge with someone that you trust. Trusting the person you're being transparent to is very important. It can be tricky because you want to create healthy trust if you're a leader with your team, but also you need to have good boundaries before you just share sensitive information. For example, recently I was in the room with an intern and one of my supervisors of the team, and I was talking about someone who was negotiating a price, and their counteroffer was significantly higher than anything we would pay them for the task. And the supervisor asked, well, how much did they ask? Maybe if the intern was not in the room, I would have told her the amount because we have had transparency conversations about pay in the past, especially with grant funds. But because of the audience, I did not want to seem like I'm just talking negatively about people and what they think they should earn. And so I said, I can't tell you that. And that's just some of the things you have to navigate as a leader: who you trust with information, who you share information with, and where. So I get it. It can be difficult, but also it's important to have some transparency with challenges and choosing the right people to share it with. And number 3, you can give yourself grace by finding something you can forgive yourself for, maybe a recent mistake that you've made, and move forward from it. I consistently check with myself when I'm beating myself up, especially for kind of misbehaving or overreacting. I have a tendency to go from kind of 0 to 10. And then I'll acknowledge that I've done that and come back down. But for me personally, it's that release of that really helps me get to a point where I can give myself grace. If you're one of those people who beat yourself up for doing things in the way you wouldn't normally do it, or if you reacted to something how you didn't think was ideal, it's okay to ask yourself, am I being fair? What would my bestie tell me if they were hearing me? Would they say that I'm being mean to myself? I'm so happy to have y'all with me. We took a glimpse into my military journey, and we heard the inspiring story of 6888 through the lens of the S.T.R.O.N.G Leadership Model. Remember, leadership isn't about perfection, it's about leading with resilience and grace. Next time, we will continue to dive into these concepts of leadership, maybe identifying and overcoming micromanaging triggers. I think that's a good topic. Yeah, that is. That's what we'll talk about next week. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to grow with you as we uncover what it means to lead with ambition and purpose. Until next time, take care.
Where do we go from? Where do we go from here? No one can save us from